You are listening to the Julie Parker Practice Success Podcast, where you discover management insights and strategies for your successful dental practice. There are also interviews with key people in the industry who have advice and services to help you and your team achieve great success. So welcome to this episode of the Julie Parker Practice Success Podcast. And today I've got a guest who I am so delighted is joining me. We met at ADX recently here in Melbourne, and the minute she told me about what her business was all about, I know it's going to excite all of you as well. So I had to get her on for a podcast episode. Welcome, Naomi Arnold from The Human Practice. How are you?
Really well, Julie. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's really delightful to have you here, Naomi, or Nomes is how you are more commonly known, Nomes. And the human practice, it really excited me, and I think it's going to excite everyone else out there as well, because you really deal with a very human element of teamwork, and it's the element that many people have no idea about. It confuses them. It makes them feel very uncomfortable. And that is this kind of interactional communication that we have with our team members, even in difficult times.
Yeah, absolutely, Julie. I think the way that most people phrase it is difficult conversations. And we find that it's not just in dental practices. It's, across all industries. It's even in personal relationships at home and family. People tend to avoid having those difficult conversations. And there's a whole range of reasons for that. And that's part of the process that we go through in making those difficult conversations. I won't say easy. I don't think they ever become easy, but making those difficult conversations less difficult.
We resist them so much. Let's start off with who you are, how you developed the human practice. What's been your journey so far?
Yeah, I guess my story starts right back to when I left school. I thought I wanted to become a nurse, and at the time, I'm Tasmanian, and at the time nursing was only offered in Launceston, which was from where I lived at the time about a 3-hour drive. So I was going to have to relocate, and I think I was just a little bit too young to want to do that at the time. And so my mum really encouraged me to have a year out and perhaps try and gain some other insight into a nursing environment. And so I chose dental assisting. So for a long time I was a dental assistant. I was very fortunate to have access to a dentist who performed a lot of oral surgery in a hospital setting. So I was doing a lot of theatre work, and I decided, you know what, I don't know if nursing is for me. And so that was a really fortunate exercise that I went through, rather than doing 3 years of university and coming out the other side and realising it wasn't right for me. So I, at that point, decided I'd travel overseas. I did so. I picked up a fiancé and brought him back to Australia, and then I studied at university in Brisbane, and I studied business, and I wasn't even entirely sure that I wanted to do that, but it was incredibly fortuitous because I loved it. It really wasn't something I knew a lot about, and it allowed me to get into human resource management. So I studied an extended major in HR, and during this process, even when I was travelling overseas, I was continuing to support myself by being a dental assistant. So I got this incredible insight into a range of different dental practices in different countries and different states of Australia. So it was really insightful for me. And then I started, obviously, my HR career, beginning with the recruitment, moving through to generalist HR consulting roles, right through to management and leadership positions. And again, I was very lucky in my HR journey that I was able to work in roles that allowed me to work across different states in Australia, but also in New Zealand and Southeast Asia. So I got a very, comprehensive view of different HR management principles in different cultures as well. Came back to Tasmania. I was heavily pregnant at the time, so this was 10 years after studying and working in HR, and I really needed to work out what I was going to do here that would allow me to support raising a family. And I had, again, a lot of the things that tend to happen in my life seem to be quite fortuitous. But I came across a dentist that I had worked with previously who was also a friend of mine, and he was looking at purchasing a practice that he was currently working at, but he was not at all interested in the management side of practice, so managing the people, the marketing, the finance of the practice, the day-to-day runnings of it. We sort of decided that between the two of us, we could form a business partnership. I could manage the business side of the practice and he would manage the clinical side of the practice. And so that happened. We didn't buy that practice, that fell through, but we did set up a brand new practice. It was a greenfield site, and that was 10 years ago now as well. So I guess, how did I get to where I am now? I've got that 10 years of owning a dental practice and managing that dental practice. We've just bought another practice about a year ago, so I now have 2 practices.
But together again?
No, with a different dentist. So I have another business partner who's a dentist. So 2 separate surgeries, but they are branded under the same brand. And we've done that in terms of, I guess, the longevity of the practice. The business partner that I have a partnership with now is sort of the succession plan is for him to come into the other practice further down the track as well. So that's where we're at the moment. So 2 dental practices, and then because I decided that the quiet life isn't for me, whilst I was doing that, I still wanted to keep my hand in human resource management, apart from obviously the HR that was required in those dental practices. I'm very passionate about leadership development and emotional intelligence, and how as leaders, combining the two, we can be really effective leaders. And so I did a lot of leadership coaching for corporates in the Hobart and Tasmania area. So I've been doing all of those things over the last, let's say, 10 to 20 years. And I guess it's that combined experience that puts me in the position that I am in now, where I can give contextual support to dentists and practice managers about HR-related matters, but also importantly, how to manage those difficult conversations, improving your communication confidence and using that emotional intelligence to do so.
Just magnificent. And it's just such a needed area for attention and guidance. I remember reading a book, and I won't be able to remember the name of it, but it was written by a dentist over in America, and it was a compilation of different dentists' input after they answered a series of questions. And one of the questions was, if you had your time over again, what would you have done differently? And they all had a common theme to that, and that was learn how to manage people better earlier, because that ended up being their biggest challenge. And it's a huge discomfort too when I listen to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of interviews with dentists, and so many of them do talk about it's the human element that makes it very challenging. I know how to do the dentistry. I don't know how to do the people within it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not unique to dentists. I think dentists need to not be so harsh on themselves. I think anyone that comes out of university with a technical degree, whether it be law or engineering or dentistry, they all find themselves in the same boat.
That's for sure. And so it's more than just managing the difficult conversations, isn't it? It's about creating an environment where if they need to happen, they're managed more effectively. But the way the whole team, the environment that we're creating for them is one that is very kind of healthy and helpful from an emotional, spiritual, functional perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I talk a lot about difficult conversations and brave communication, because I know that that's a pain point for a lot of people. If we drill right down to the very basic fundamentals, it often surrounds difficult conversations. But actually, if we pad that back out, where that goes to is looking at the entire practice culture and how people are feeling within the practice when they're there, not only as an employee, but as a patient. And how those two things are so interrelated, the employee experience and the patient experience. And so we do a lot of work around that as well with practices in terms of how do you want your staff to feel and how do you want your patients to feel. And we also workshop with the staff themselves to say, how do you want to feel? So it's not just the leaders, the dentists of the practice that are saying, okay, well, I think they want this. It's I know they want this because we've received this feedback from them.
Wonderful. And I was looking on your website earlier, and you do workshops, and working with all the team members is such a wonderful thing. Very difficult. I shouldn't say very difficult. One of the challenges can be if you're having conversations with the team manager or the owner of the business, and they are not yet versed well enough to be able to follow through with the rest of the team, for you to be able to access the whole team and do some really groundwork sort of stuff is very, very helpful, and I think very, very useful, a wonderful, useful step for team managers and practice owners. Quite often I relate back to and encourage the people that I work with to relate everything back from your dental team environment to what your family unit environment is. So, for example, if you had an underperforming team member that all of a sudden started to develop a bit of a bad attitude, rather than try to nut out what you're supposed to do in that situation, think instead, well, what would I do if I was the parent and this was my family and this is one of my children that started to act out? Where would my mind go there as well? Because it's all kind of relative. And when you were talking about, it's not just the difficult discussion, it's, what's going on, how the team members are feeling, etc. If there was a consultant or a therapist out there that just helped parents have tricky discussions with their parents, their natural first step would be, well, what's led us all to this point? Like, what family dynamics are in play that have led us to this point? And so that's what you're talking about as well, is what are the team dynamics? Because it's a bunch of individuals, and my husband is Australasia's passion provocateur, does a lot of work with people and teams and things, and he says, we're all weirdos. None of us are commonly the same. We've got all these different experiences and perceptions and meanings and principles and values, and we're all a bunch of weirdos just trying to get along with each other.
It's so true. It's really true. And so what we encourage people to do is really look at the personality styles within the practice. And I think a lot of practices now are aware of this, and they are doing personality assessments within their practice, but it can't just stop there. So we use DISC, there's Myers-Briggs, there's a range of systems out there that you can use. But it's really important that once we've got that information, once we've tracked it, that we start to workshop it and we start to talk about it and communicate it, and that everyone has an opportunity in the practice to sort of discuss, this is what really resonates with me. Because again, we know with all of these assessments, they're not 100% accurate. So there's going to be some things that really stand out to someone, and they're going to resonate with that and say, yes, actually, I can see that about myself. And then there's going to be some things that aren't so, and it's important not to get hung up on that and just move forward with what resonates with you. But to give them the opportunity then to say, particularly when it's surrounding communication, my personality style is this. I identify as that. And so what that means in a difficult situation, I'm likely to need to hear information or be communicated to like this. If we're using DISC as an example, Julie, D, is the dominant style. They're very direct. And if they're in a high-pressure environment, and we do have a lot of dentists that are Ds, if they're in a high-pressure environment in the surgery, for example, in the middle of a procedure, let's just say it's oral surgery, they're going to want to have any information that's given to them at that point to be very direct, very short and precise. And so if they don't receive it like that, their behaviour that then they're about to display might be too assertive for the person who's receiving it on the other end. And that's where we start to look at, okay, so if we've got a dentist who's in the surgery who's a D, and we've got a DA who is, or dental assistant, I shouldn't say DA, we get confused with all the acronyms, a dental assistant who is maybe an S, which is a steady and stable, or a C, which is a conscientious, they're going to want to receive that information in a way that is calm, and they have the opportunity to ask questions, and there's lots of supporting information. And of course you can see there with an S or a C and a D in a room under a high pressure environment, it's not always going to work, So to be able to have those discussions openly and increase our self-awareness around how people like to be communicated to based on their personality, it's really mind-blowing for practices. They just go, oh my gosh, I can see where these problems are occurring and what are the steps we can put in place to ensure that we're doing things better moving forward.
Yeah, it makes me recall back a few conversations I've had with practice owners in the past where they say, do I really have to start being everyone's therapist? Why can't I just give a direction and have people respond? And, I do say you don't have to do anything, but the result is going to remain the same unless you do something different. And it is about recognizing that, okay, I do want a different result. Therefore, I will go and embrace that process of not becoming people's therapist, but just becoming more aware about it. But this is the thing, this is the power of knowledge. Once you start learning things from people like yourself, Nomes, all of a sudden you can see yourself getting to that better result.
Yeah, absolutely. My husband, he works in health and safety and environment, and he has a favourite saying, and he uses it in our family, and we all roll our eyes, but it's absolutely true, which is the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. So if you're having a situation within your practice that you're not happy with, if you're refusing, as you say, Julie, if you don't address it or if you don't do something differently, that's where it will remain. That will become the standard that is allowable and acceptable within your practice. And the longer that you choose not to address it, the more reinforced it becomes and the bigger the problem becomes.
Yeah. And when you're taking people through the DISC profile or the Myers-Briggs, you're helping them to become a bit more self-aware as well, and they start to recognise, oh, I've got the particular styles as well, so therefore everyone else has a right to have their own particular style. What role does self-awareness play in this process?
It's probably one of the most important parts of the process, and we find that DISC does a great job of sort of increasing that. But if we have someone who needs more work on that, so that the feedback that you tend to get, and this isn't the case at all, but what people see are things or behaviours that make them appear to be stubborn or not interested in other people's opinions. It's their way or the highway, those types of things. When we're starting to hear that coming from a particular personality, then I'd really encourage actually working on emotional intelligence with that individual. And that work increases self-awareness like nothing I have ever seen before, and it's really enlightening for the individual. And if they're ready to lean into the process, it's absolutely life-changing for them.
And this is the thing, the stuff that you're talking about and teaching and guiding teams through, this is life-changing. This goes beyond the bounds of their employment and their job.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said earlier, it's not just something that we choose to do in our workplace. We can bring this stuff home into our family environments, into our relationships, whether they be, a husband-wife scenario or even our friendships. So it applies across all areas.
And in this world that we're in now, it's not just happening in Australia, it's happening in other countries as well, where recruitment has become such an enormous challenge. And so we're finding it very hard to find good recruits through experience. We're finding it very difficult to shift from that mindset of, gosh, when I used to put out an ad, I'd get 30 applications. They'd all have some kind of dental experience, and I'd be in a position where I could say, lucky you get to be offered the job. Where nowadays you're getting people who have no relation to dental at all. And if you get people who are good applicants, you want them to come in for interviews, they're not turning up for interviews. All the challenges that we're all very aware of nowadays around the recruitment space for dental. Never has it been so important, because we're also moving into generations that the working environment, the spiritual, emotional kind of health of the place, I don't know the right terms to use, is very important to generations that are younger than myself. It's still important to me, but when I was getting jobs, if it was a bad working environment, you kind of just sucked it up a little bit. That's all changing as well, which is very good. But it's never been more important to really address what working culture are you fostering, and how are you going to be communicating that so you get like-minded people coming into your organisation, so you're bolstering it rather than depleting it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's where social media comes into play a lot in terms of communicating your employment brand and the employee experience that you provide for your staff at your practice. And a lot of people do a great job of that. But I know that if I'm recruiting someone, I'm probably letting all my secrets away now, but if I'm recruiting something, I will go onto social media and I will look at profiles and get an understanding of the values that person might have in terms of the images that they're displaying, or the memes, or what they're talking about, or what they're interested in. And that forms part of our recruitment process in terms of the discussions we have in the interview and ensuring that their values are aligned with ours as a practice. Now, if I'm doing that, I know they're doing that about our practice as well. So I know that they're jumping on and they're like, what does it look like to work at Dom Dental, in the Dom Dental Group? What are the staff saying? So it's really important from a recruitment perspective, absolutely, to get that part right.
Because once you've got somebody, and this is another dynamic that I'm seeing roll out in various practices that I've worked with over the years, that you've got great team members, but then over time, for whatever reason, you might be able to provide a little bit of insight as to what the reasons could be, but a formerly wonderful, totally engaged employee starts to become a little disengaged over the years, and then they're faced with somebody who's actually become, a little bit of a challenge to work with and impeding the success of the team culture from continuing to move forward. Have you come across that, or do you have any ideas around that?
Yeah, absolutely. That happens all the time. And the reason for that is culture it's not a stagnant thing. It's ever evolving, it's changing, and it's ready to be shaped. And so the people that form your practice team, of course, are going to influence the way that culture, grows and develops. And if you have, where I see it happen mostly is if we've had a couple of people within the practice move on to other things. They may have just gone, a couple of girls have gone on parental leave, or they've moved into off to another practice or into another industry altogether. And what happens is that then shakes up the team dynamic enough that the people that remain feel potentially insecure in what part they play within the team. And so it's really important at that point, when there's any type of change within the practice, that you're reaffirming your culture, your values, and really ensuring that the people that remain are feeling safe and secure in the environment that they've been left. And what does that look like to them? What does that mean for them? You're having those conversations, because it's not something that we necessarily think about. People, particularly from a practice owner or a practice manager's perspective, when you're losing a staff member, you're more stressed and focused on finding that replacement staff member than you are about the ones that are still left in your practice. And it's a really important time to ensure that the ones that are left behind are okay and understand what this means for them moving forward.
Yeah, it does bring my mind back again to that family unit again. If the family were going to go through a moving of house, or one child's going from one high school to a brand new high school, or we're going to bring a foster child in, or we're going to, one child is shown, Amina, my buddy, Amina Basile, one of her children is very, very skilled in acrobatics and calisthenics, and I don't know the right word for it, and so a lot of focus and energy is on her around that. A lot of, many hours every week, 26 hours a week or something like that in practice sessions. And so when these sort of dynamics change within the family unit, it does change the way people perceive, how safe am I here? Am I just as loved and valued and appreciated? And how is it? It's that WIIFM. What's in it for me? How is this going to affect my life? And I suppose, why wouldn't that happen in your dental team environment as well, where you've got people who have been there for a long time, but there's been possibly a couple, maybe too many of changes, without really checking in with people and creating that environment where these sort of effective conversations can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk a lot about, this culture matrix of having an environment where it's a combination of showing investment in your employees, but also having those difficult conversations. So showing them a little bit of love and support, but also making sure that we're not going overboard and not having those difficult conversations at the same time. And what I mean by that is if we're giving them too much love and too much reassurance, and we're making that cultural environment very easy for them. We're not setting them targets. We're not pulling them up on unacceptable behaviour. We're not having those conversations. We're sort of letting that go by the wayside. So whilst it's really important to ensure that people feel safe and secure, it's also really important that we're not avoiding difficult conversations during that time as well, because what happens is it becomes an easy street for that employee where they feel like there's so much turmoil at the moment, no one's going to pull me up if I'm a little bit slack in this area. And so it's always a balance, Julie.
Yeah, because knowing that where that line is important. And I think that's one of the things that stops people from asking those questions, what's your experience like here as being part of our team? What areas are helpful? What areas aren't all that helpful? Because they fear that if they are faced with this is what's happening in the team, or this is what I need as an individual, what if I can't fix that for this person? So I'm not going to ask the question at all in the first place. But you're always better off knowing, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And we certainly part of the process of sort of improving your ability to tackle difficult conversations is really to go back to challenging your thoughts and ideals around what the outcome is going to be. So quite often we're thinking about how we might react in that situation rather than how the other person might react in that situation. And so we start to form assumptions that have this incredible bias because it's based on our own experience and the way that we think rather than the way that that particular person may actually feel about that situation. So if we go into that conversation with a negative mindset, that, mind you, has entirely been created by ourselves, we're very unlikely to have a successful conversation or have one at all.
Yeah, gosh, and it's interesting. I hate constantly bringing up the COVID situation, but it seems to play a role in a lot of discussions around how, team dynamics and things, because we did go through a whole bunch of challenges. And I think never before have we had a situation where business owners or the leaders of the organisation were so, called upon to be challenged in terms of the values that they were talking about as a team. One of the classic, and to really simplify it down, we're like a family here. So they're appealing to all their, potential team members and talking about it as a group. We're like a family here. And then the minute there were discussions around lockdowns and restricted services and stuff, then they were pushing out as many team members as they legally possibly could so they weren't on the payroll. Totally understandable, understand all the pressures around it. But it's those sort of situations that can really shake existing team members, remaining team members to the core, because they're thinking, you say this, but what I've just observed is something different. And the flip side was true too. These team members say, I'm so loyal to you. I love working here. I'll be here forever. And then the minute there was, a thought that, oh gosh, I can stay at home and work from home. That's fantastic and still get paid. That's tremendous. They were at the door straight away. And it was actually very challenging them to get them back in to the working environment to do some really helpful work. That must have been a space and time that was very interesting for you.
Yes, it was. And I think I have to reflect on how we managed it internally in our own practice at the time. We're very clear to, and it's interesting, the word family, Julie, because a lot of people use it more so in dental practices than any other industry that I've come across. And I feel that the reason for that is the size of the organisation itself. We tend to have dental practices that are, 2 or 3 surgery practices. So the teams are 10 to 15, a size of 10, 15, that can even be smaller. So it's easy for us to assimilate that group of people like a family unit. But we have always been very clear that whilst our team members, if you were to ask them, how do you feel about the culture at that practice, I am sure they will say it feels like a family. But at the same time, they very much understand that the practice is a business and that we have been very clear in our communication with our staff way before the time it becomes a problem, the possible business implications of what's about to happen. So with COVID, we felt that there was actually more of an assurance required around their own safety and their family's safety than they were concerned about their employment in the first instance. They were very scared about what coronavirus was. And so we did a lot of work around, researching. Tassie, we were fortunate. We had nowhere near as many lockdowns as Melbourne, but we were one of the first to lock down because we had one of the first outbreaks in northwestern Tasmania. And so all of a sudden there is a bit of a culture within Tasmania that you kind of feel protected from the rest of Australia, and all of a sudden that was jeopardised. And so we had a lot of staff feeling really unsafe. And at that point, they were still allowed to come to work. We weren't locked down when the coronavirus was first being spoken about, and yet they were still quite very scared to come in. So there was a lot of information provided them about, what we knew about coronavirus, how is it transmitted, how can we protect ourselves. A lot of the information and communication was around that in the first instance. And then when lockdown started to occur, it then turned into, what does that mean for the practice? What does that mean for your salary? Can we put you on half pay? Can we, use up your reserve leave? We spoke about all of those things. And then, of course, when JobKeeper came into place, that then obviously provided that extra level of assurance. So the conversations we had weren't just around we're a family unit and we're going to protect you, and please don't worry about it, and be loyal to us and continue to show up to work. It was very much about, this is the reality of the situation. Of course, we're going to do everything we can to support you and make sure that you and your family are okay. But there's a lot of unknowns here, and they were with us every step of the way.
That's fantastic. I love that. And I think it was a time that really did highlight to a lot of people, we do need to work on how we communicate as a team, because it would have highlighted, if there were any issues going on, it would have been highlighted then.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you are coming across teams, or I shouldn't put it that way, I've certainly been had communications with people over the years that have said, my team have gotten to the point where they really dislike working with each other here. There's a lot of dysfunction going on. It's to the point where I have no idea how to tackle this. Are you faced with those sort of situations?
Yeah, and I guess that's a very broad statement. A lot has happened before it's got to that point. So it's about unpacking all of that with that individual or with the group of people that it applies to. So we would go back a long way in the journey to sort of find out when did the change start to occur, and what was happening at that point in time that started to trigger that change within the practice. Because it's not as if just, one day everything's fine and then the next day you go into the practice and you hate everyone. It's not working. There's a series of things that happen before that. And quite often, it's a bit of a slow creeper. So it could have been happening for a very long time, but we will be able to pinpoint back as to what actually occurred, and then what happens subsequently that's continued to contribute to this state of unrest.
Yeah. Once someone has kind of had a bit of an attitude shift, they used to be great. Now they're and I remember back. I don't know if I read it or heard it somewhere, but it was a marriage counsellor, and they said, if I get a couple coming in and they're angry at each other, I can work with that. If they're resentful of each other, they've held on to that anger for way too long, and it's usually a parting of ways the best result. What are your thoughts around the people that you've worked with that possibly have tipped into resentment or been angry for too long? Do you think there is a way of coming back around again? I suppose it depends a lot on the self-awareness of the person involved.
Yeah, not always. I agree with that marriage counsellor. I think that there is quite a few situations where it is best that the parties just move on, and it is a process of self-awareness. We obviously need to be very careful as practice owners and managers that we're not moving into a conversation with the intention that that person ends up leaving, because there's a whole lot of things around constructive dismissal and, employment obligations that we just can't do that. The intention moving into that conversation always has to be from a place of assistance. This conversation is going to assist this person to understand what their priorities are and what's important for them. And if their values are no longer aligned with ours as a practice, then what can I do as an employer to support them? And one of those things might be to provide them with the support and development to, and again, and this is a very hypothetical situation, but it's based on what the individual requires, not what you require as a practice owner. You need to be effectively listening to that person and understanding why it is that they've got to a place of resentment. If there is a way to address it, fantastic. If there isn't, and that person through self-awareness identifies that actually this is no longer the place for them, then you support them in moving forward. And that is something that can be managed effectively and in a way where that person moves on to another place of employment without any ill feelings for the practice.
Yeah, we want to try to avoid that as well, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, if we're talking about, you've got to a place where someone's feeling resentful, there's obviously ill feelings occurring. And so you're wanting to address those in a way that's going to repair or mend that relationship. And the only way to do that is to listen and empathise with the person that's feeling those ill feelings. Those are the feelings that we're addressing, not our feelings about how they feel about us.
Because our management of these sort of situations, when people are on the cusp of are they going to work out and stay, or are they going to kind of, in quotation marks, reform and reform and stay, or not reform and have to go, it is only fair that we give people every chance to succeed. So we do need to take responsibility. Our 50% of the deal is to make sure that we're being very clear with expectations, that we're being very supportive, and that we're managing the situation and the person in a way that's not going to really bring the defences up, because that's unhelpful too. Expecting somebody to jump on board with the way you want to do things after you've triggered their defensive mechanisms is an unrealistic expectation.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a Latin phrase, it's a principle in law, and I can't pronounce it, but it's because I'm terrible at Latin, but it basically means no crime without law. And so what it's saying is if we haven't outlined what our expected behaviours are of people within the practice, if we haven't made it very clear to our staff that this is acceptable and this isn't, and this is what we require of you, then if they don't do those things, the blame cannot lie with that person. We need to be, as practice owners and practice managers, very clear about what the law is, what are our expected behaviours within the practice.
Yeah, it's like walking down the street and the police come and nab you for something. You said, I had no idea I wasn't allowed to walk on the left side of the road. So can you explain the different ways you can help dental practice managers and owners and teams in becoming far better in terms of team culture, individual performance management, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can work with just the leaders of the practice, so whether it be the practice manager or for smaller practices, the principal dentist. And we start again, coming right back to that communication confidence. We'll start there and then we will expand outwards. So it could be, I have a product, Julie, called Conversation Coach. It's a very simple product. They basically just pick up the phone and have a conversation with me about a difficult conversation that they're about to move into, and we talk about the tips and tricks and the strategies and the language and all of the things that go with that before they're about to move into that conversation, to really build their communication confidence around it and to hopefully get a successful outcome because of it. So that's available on a one-off basis. It's also available on a membership basis, and the membership basis would be fantastic for practice managers that have just newly moved into that role, or new practice owners that are just completely lost in terms of how do I go about having these conversations. And it doesn't have to be just with DAs. It could be conversations with associate dentists and forming contracts and workplace relationships. How do I have this conversation? I want to let them know that percentage is unacceptable. So how do I do that without, losing that person entirely? So that's one way that I can support them. Quite often that leads then into more of a strategic approach. So rather than just being reactionary around conversations that are about to occur, how can I ensure that I'm building our whole team's awareness around effective communication in the practice? And that's when we look at either sending some of your staff away to a workshop that I hold in different states, or I can come to your dental practice and we can do a whole of practice exercise.
And I've noticed that you've got an event coming up in Sydney.
I've got a few. They're all on the website, so you can go on and have a look. So that's a really lovely thing to do as well for some of the staff or for whole of practice. And then we look at bigger pieces again where I might come in and we go, okay, let's go right back to the beginning and look at the values and the purpose of your practice, and we're going to embed a culture that's going to continue to assist you in managing your staff. So we're going to do a whole lot of work to begin with, and yes, absolutely, it will require continued communication, but getting all of those systems and processes and policies and procedures down pat to begin with, and a bit like what we were talking about before, setting the law of the practice so that everyone is very aware of what's expected of one another, and moving forward from there. So that's a bigger culture piece of work, and it requires more time, but is very, in terms of your return on investment, it's probably the largest.
And I think it's just such a powerful project for a practice to take on, because the way the team are led, the team dynamics, this ripples straight through to the patient experience, doesn't it?
Oh, it's so intrinsically linked. The way that employees are feeling in the practice, and the way that a patient feels is just so connected. If a patient walks in, and let's face it, a high percentage of our practice patient base, will be, anxious when they're coming to the dental practice, and to be able to walk into an environment where they feel the staff are relaxed. They may even be having a laugh in the background. They're using language that is kind and friendly and supportive of one another. It really relaxes the patient. And on the converse of that, if they're walking into an environment where people aren't talking, there's very little communication, you can feel the negativity or the frostiness in the air, the patient's going to feel very uneasy about that.
Yeah. And my younger sister and I just yesterday were doing some stuff around my lovely mum. And one of the things we were doing was we had an appointment time with a kind of retirement community space person. And so we went and had that appointment time. Then we drove past another one on the way home. And so we thought, we'll just jump in there, no appointment time, and see if we can have a little look around their grounds. And it was so evident that team worked so well together. One of the main people were walking out the front door with keys in hand and looked at us and said, "Oh, you guys look lost. Surely I can help you." And we said, "Yes, this is what we're on about." And he said, "Well, you do normally need an appointment time, but just let me see if," I can't remember her name, let's call her Sally. "Let's just see if Sally's actually free at the moment, that she can take you through a couple of the rooms." Grab Sally. Absolutely. You could hear their conversation out in the hallway. "Yeah, absolutely. I am free at the moment." And it makes you feel quite extraordinary as a consumer in that space, knowing that you are top priority, that you are going to be well managed. This is a professional, friendly outfit. Going to the same outfit where they don't have that kind of collaborative way, that nice culture going on, where the main person walks out the door and doesn't break stride, just continues walking out the door, even though it looks like that they'd be able to help us, and then asks that team member, would you be able to help? No, I'm too busy. Oh, okay. And having the patient overhear all these things, it is a wildly different experience. And we need to focus on all areas that impact the patient experience, because it's the patient experience that helps make you viable as a dental practice. How many new patients you have to get all the time to replace the ones that are always leaving because they're not feeling as valued, and the Google reviews that you do or don't get, maybe the bad ones that you get because it isn't a great culture there. And going back to the recruitment space, are you going to be able to appeal to people to say, come work with us? Because when you look on our Facebook, the word about town is that we're great or we're not so great. So it impacts so many elements of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself, Julie.
So if there are practices out there that go, oh, we really want to get this project up and running, because what's that saying? The best time to do all of this is when you first opened your business. The next best time is right now. So if they want to right now start either accessing you for a bit of one-on-one help with the individual conversations, or get the whole team involved and have it be one of the most powerful projects you could ever take on as a practice, what's their best next step? What's the experience like for them?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is to jump onto the website, get my contact details and call me. It always starts, funnily enough, with a conversation. But realistically, I need to really understand, I guess, what your pain points are to be able to effectively recommend the best product for you. And, of course, the things that I'm providing at the moment are, I guess, programs that I've put together that attempts to address the issues that I'm currently seeing as most frequent, but there might be something that we need to create specifically for you, and in fact they're the things that I really love to do. So if there is something that's sitting a little bit outside of, I'm not sure whether this is, whether she'll be able to help me with that because it's not on her website, please just still have a conversation with me, because there's so many other things that we can do as well to support you.
That is a really fantastic thing to add in, because I agree with you. That's part of the job that I really love too. Getting a new query come in, you go, oh, wow, how could we make a fantastic solution for that particular thing? So that conversation is really important, and don't hold anything back. Just tell Nomes all your issues. What you would like to, the goals that you would like to identify and work towards, and she'll certainly be able to help you out. The website is in the show note. It is thehumanpractice.com. Your email's in there. Your phone number is in there. I love that you've got your mobile number in there so people can jump onto you straight away. And I want to thank you so much for this episode. This is an aspect of the business management that a lot of practice owners and managers kind of don't consider until later on, saying, I really think I need to start addressing this area. I think I've got the time and headspace to start thinking about this now. And once you start to learn the hows, the strategies, the insights of Nomes, then all of a sudden you can start to feel like you've got a sense of control over it, and you can have a really positive impact in your own environment. So thank you so much for your contribution today.
Thank you, Julie. It's been lovely. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. We could speak for hours, I'm sure.
That is absolutely right. I love your headspace. So do jump on to the Human Practice. Have a look through the website, look at the events, sign up to the events, get your team involved in getting this fantastic project moving within your organisation. Or at the very least, if you feel like you need a buddy to speak to before that next difficult conversation, you couldn't find a more educated, experienced buddy than this. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time. If you enjoyed today's podcast, then you should come along and join the club. The club is a whole library of lunch and learns, with new lunch and learns being produced all the time that help your dental team gain greater success in your systems, in your team behaviours, in your patient management, in your patient engagement, in their treatment plans. They are usually around half an hour in length, and so team members can sit down, be paid for their lunch break, eat lunch while they're being inspired and delivered all of these insights and strategies that can be implemented so you all achieve greater levels of success. Also, Amina and I, my buddy from Dental Management Expertise, have a company, Dental Business Mastery, together. And our flagship online 1-year course for dental practice managers and dental practice owners to learn how to very successfully manage your dental practice is available. Head over to dentalbusinessmastery.com.au to find out more information, and has information about any other courses that we've got available. Also, make sure you do jump onto my website, julieparkerpracticesuccess.com.au, and you will see a whole load of free information. There are articles, the blog, downloads, templates, a whole load of things that are designed to help you overcome any specific challenge that you've got going on in your practice at the moment. If you have any suggestions of topics or guests that I can have on the podcast, please let me know. Thanks for listening.